gentlemen, welcome to 319. I am your host, Keith Andrew, and I'm here with Karina Lafayette. I just want to say thank you for joining us and being a guest on my talk show.
Thank you, no problem.
Now, for people who want to know the point of my talk show, the whole point of my talk show is to show people that even with having a learning disability, I can still overcome controversy and reach my goals in life. At the same time, I'm able to turn myself into a perfect example for people out there dealing with any types of learning disabilities and disabilities. But you should never give up, and you should prove to people you can still amount to something. That labels do not dictate who you are and who you're going to be. You should prove to them you can still amount to something. Now it's a half hour, 40 minutes of your time. You can say anything you want, curse if you want to, express yourself as you would like. You know, it's uncensored, freedom of speech, freedom of self-expression. And starting off, what can you tell us a little about yourself? How was life growing up?
You mean in terms of childhood or how I got to my career now?
Let's start off with the basics. You know, how was your life growing up? Did you enjoy high school and college? Did you do any sports?
Mm. Well, generally growing up, I was an only child, so I mostly kept to myself. I used to enjoy reading a lot of books, writing. I was usually like that awkward kid in the back of the class that would be like very reserved. I didn't have a lot of friends, but whatever friends I did have, they were pretty close. And I also faced a lot of bullying, especially from girls. And also mainly because my mom used to work a lot. Her and I weren't very close for quite a while during my childhood. And then when she stopped working, we were more like, I would say instead of more like mother-daughter, we were more like best friends. But at the same time, the relationship wasn't really healthy. Like it kind of lacked boundaries, I felt. And also, it almost felt like whatever friendships I did have, she always had a way of trying to like turn me against people, so that way I would remain isolated. And there was like a lot of emotional abuse. And one of the ways that helped me a lot was through watching film. So like I saw my first Charlie Chaplin film when I was 7 years old. And by 14, I had a MySpace page for him that was had about generally, I would say like 1,000 members at it. And so cinema was really the way that I could use as a means of expression, because growing up I was very shy, and today I've overcome that shyness, but I still mainly keep to myself. I enjoy mostly working behind the scenes and telling stories that people relate to.
No, absolutely. And for a perfect example, I used to be that person too. I used to be in the back of the class, or then I would be in front of the class because I can't see what's on my glasses. So I was the kid in front of the class, but I was always the one that I always felt like I had to put a face on to fit in. It doesn't matter if I was with my brother's friends or whoever. When I felt uncomfortable, I felt like I had to put a face on to make myself like, okay, I'm with this group of people, now I have to act like how they would act. But also growing up, I was always the kid who's the loner, who I have poor social skills that played a factor in it. And it was pretty much just like, you need to do something and get yourself out there. And for the longest time, I worked in retail, and I used to work over at North Face, and I had the badge. And so when I walked over to people, I had like a purpose to say, hey, if you need something, you just come to me. I can help you find what it is, because it gave me confidence. And slowly over the years, like, well, now I have an excuse to approach people. And a couple of years ago, I think a year ago or 2 years ago, a couple of years ago, I was in the Woodbury Commons, and I was looking around, and I saw some cute girls. And I'm like, oh, I would really like to talk to you, but I don't like being rejected. How can I show you, but I'm not a creep, that I am professional? So, I would just I would use my talk show as a crutch and say, hey, now I have a reason to approach someone because now I have a reason. And it's pretty much, like you were saying, if you have shyness and you like to be behind the camera, and it's pretty much, you need to give yourself that extra motivation and say, I'm not going to be the person that hides behind the camera. I want to show people that I can still overcome obstacles. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, for sure. So, in general, like I've been in contact for about 2 years now, and basically, I could tell a little bit of the story of how exactly I left. And the way it happened is that one night I came home, and at the time, like she was dealing with mental health issues. So one night I came home, and she asked for my bank card. Then the two of us got into an argument. At that point, we had been arguing for about a few years, my mom and I. But that night, something in my head just clicked, and so like I took my dog with me, and we went to the police station. Yeah, sorry, it's my dog. Can we cut that part out, or?
Hey, anything can happen live.
Okay. Yeah, so as I was saying, went to the police station. They drove me to my grandmother's, and then at that point, I moved in with roommates. I dropped out of university because I felt it wasn't really helping. I felt like it was more technical. Like we didn't really have the chance to do anything that I wanted to do with my career, and so then 2 years later, I moved to Toronto, and I got a few gigs as a script supervisor, and I've been making more projects on my own ever since.
No, absolutely. And for our viewers who want to know, or out of curiosity, what type of dog do you have?
He's an Airedale mix. He's 4.
Sounds like you would like to have some airtime.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, the next question I was going to ask you now, going to your career, who influenced you to start your career, and are you still an actress, or do you see yourself being behind the camera?
Who encouraged me? I would say mainly it was mostly self-motivated because I always enjoy storytelling, but what happened is in my grade 7 English class is we were reading A Midsummer Night's Dream by Shakespeare. And for whatever reason, I just really enjoyed the play. I enjoyed how when I would read the script, I could imagine the characters inside my head. And so at that age, at the time I was about 14, I started writing my first script myself. I was basically self-taught, and it just kind of happened. And at that point, when I realized I wanted to become a filmmaker, I kind of lost interest with other subjects at school. Like I would still study just for the sake of graduation, but at that point, I really knew what I wanted to do for myself, and I wouldn't exactly see myself as an actress. I've tried acting, and normally when it comes to reading lines, I'm not very good at memorizing or expressing different characters, but I definitely love working behind the scenes. I love interacting with actors and meeting new people as well.
No, absolutely. Now, the next question I was going to ask you is, what were some of your favorite scripts or stories that you ever got to, let me rephrase that. What were some of your favorite scripts that you ever wrote, or short stories that you wrote?
Scripts that I wrote?
Yes.
Well, one favorite of mine is a short film I have. It's called A Good Man. It's 20 minutes, and people can actually find it on YouTube. It's something I directed almost 3 years ago, and the reason why I enjoy it is because it's inspired by the story of my great-grandfather when he migrated from Italy over to Canada, and how he met my great-grandmother, how they fell in love. But at the same time, you also have some flash-forward parts of the film that take place in the present to kind of like give that whole parallel. And also there's a little bit of social commentary relating to immigration. And I just like that story because I always found my great-grandfather to be somebody very inspiring, even though I never met him because he passed away sometime in the 80s. And another project of mine I enjoy, it's a documentary I directed a few years ago on a student strike that we had in Quebec back in 2012. And at the end of the day, I enjoy stories that are more character-oriented. I don't really enjoy movies where the characters are kind of like passive and things are happening to them. I kind of enjoy seeing characters that like making mistakes and that kind of stand out, or like the underdog stories.
No, absolutely. And perfect example, underdogs. It's a Rocky, it was Cinderella Man that stands out. And actually, those are the only two that come to mind. What about you? What were I can't even talk. What were some of your favorite underdog movies?
Well, there's one movie I kind of like watching quite often. It's The Pursuit of Happiness, which is based on a true story about well, now he's a businessman and stockbroker, but he started off as a single father working and unpaid internship so he could advance his career. And at the time, he was often even like sleeping in washrooms, sleeping in homeless shelters. I always find those kind of stories really inspiring. I also like a lot the movie Flashdance, although like the acting isn't very good, but I kind of enjoy how she's a self-taught dancer, and when we see that whole scene where she's at the ballet school and she's kind of intimidated by the professional dancers who've been practicing and training since the age of 5, and she's self-taught. So, but then like by the end, she gains her self-confidence and she sees that it's not really about her level of education; it's more about how passionate she is with her work.
No, absolutely. And a lot of people can relate to that because, a lot of people think you need fancy degrees to do what you want. You need the education. And like, education is important. I'm not saying it's not. But what really catches people's eyes is if you have the heart for what you're doing and if you're very motivated. Like, for a perfect example, people would look at your work and say you're very motivated and you have the passion, and they can see it and they can pick it up. And for my case, yeah, I suffer from a learning disability, and I don't really have that great of an education, but I'm very self motivated, and people see that I'm not gonna have labels dictate me or whatever the people want to say. But you need to find something that for yourself that stands out and make yourself unique.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, like in my case, when it comes to filmmaking, I'm not really necessarily interested in being like the next Michael Bay. I'm not interested in necessarily making films that are blockbusters, although it would be great. But at the same time, one thing I noticed is that even though those are the kinds of films that make money, those aren't really the films that people remember. Like people are more likely to remember stories like The Godfather than Transformers and those kinds of films that are more about like the special effects types.
Yeah, it is. I agree with that. But also, the reason the Transformers were a big thing is because if you're like us, who grew up in the 80s, it's one, it was catered to kids. Two, had some great actors. I would love to have Peter Collins on my show, or Frank Walker. But if you look at movies today, what catches people's attention is, the special effects. Michael Bay likes having things explode and everything. Probably has stuff running around his house that explodes. The guy's obsessed with it. But, it's basically, special effects, but you need a good story. Rocky is a perfect example of a great story because the guy came off the street. He was a bum, but he became a great fighter. And the same thing from Cinderella Man. The same thing. He had a family. He was poor, but he became a fighter, and then he became champion. Or you look at other movies like Games in I almost say Games in New York. What is that? Gangs in New York. That's another great movie. There's certain movies that just clicks. Like, for a perfect example, what if you had to describe one movie that your life would dictate or reflect to? What's the one movie you can point to?
That would reflect my own life.
Yes, I give you a perfect example. For me, the one movie that I can relate to when I was in my high school years was Almost Famous.
Okay.
Great movie, by the way.
Yeah, for sure. I've seen it. Well, for me, one movie I think that would actually relate a lot to my own high school years would be The Breakfast Club. Yeah, for sure. I think that in terms of the characters, the two that I relate to the most are the ones like, I don't remember their names, but there's the basket case and the nerd. And in terms of high school, I would definitely be a cross between those two, for sure.
It's funny. What is your opinion on this? Are you happy with the school that you went to, or do you wish, and how I feel, after watching older the movies from the 60s, 70s, especially the 80s, after seeing old movies in the 80s, isn't that the type of high school you wanted to go to? For a perfect example, like The Breakfast Club, or, what was the other, there's a bunch, or Back to the Future, when he goes back to 1955, that type of high school. It's the different environments.
Yeah, well, I think the problem I had with my high school is I always got the feeling that in order to be admired by the teachers, we had to be one of these students who was good at sports, math, science, and as somebody who's more creative oriented, was more interested in like English, history, Spanish, I felt like a part of me wasn't really good enough unless I could also excel at other things. So I feel that the education system could improve a lot in terms of making a curriculum that's more personal oriented towards each student instead of forcing students into fitting inside a certain box.
No, absolutely. That's the same thing with America. They always like to label things. But we're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, I'm going to pass the show over to you.
Okay, great.
Yourself, or as a gift for someone else. For personal connections, shoutouts, birthdays, proposals, weddings, and much more. Enter your details about yourself so the celebrity can record a personal video message, especially for you, including details such as your name, age, birthday, hobbies, or whatever else you include. As soon as the video has been recorded, you'll get an email with your link so you can share it on social media or download and keep it. Celebrities record videos as and when they can, usually within 2 weeks. But if you want a video for a specific date and it does not look like it will arrive in time, you can cancel it and get an instant refund at the click of a button. There are hundreds of celebrities to choose from and many more joining every day. Search by category or genre, buy a gift voucher, get updates and offers, and encourage your favorite celebrities to join so they can connect with fans in a fun and unique way. Raise money for their charities and much more. So order your video now for yourself or for someone else.
I'm so bored.
Want to see something really cool?
Yeah!
Now you'll never be bored again with Lootcrate, a totally bodacious mystery box packed with awesome toys, radical games, and other surprises. And the best part is, you can get Lootcrate delivered right to your door. So don't delay. Ask your parents and order today.
Everything okay in there? Yeah, everything great. I love Lootcrate.
Welcome back to 319. I am here with Katrina, and we just took a short commercial break. As I said before the commercial break, I'm going to pass the show over to you, so you can talk about anything you want, social media, your career. You can ask me hard-hitting questions. I have nothing to hide. But overall, this is your time, and our viewers would like to know more about you.
Okay, great. Well, most recently, about a week and a half ago, because I have a vlog that appears on YouTube every other Friday. So at the time, I did an episode on the Women's March on Washington that happened January 25th. And right before doing the vlog, I put out a question on social media asking people to tell me some of the worst catcalls they've heard. And basically, I only thought that a few people would answer, but within a few hours, the conversation kind of blew up. So I added a notice letting people know that I would let the conversation run. And before I knew it, it actually kind of became a short film. And the film itself is uncensored. because I found with a lot of the stories that came forward, there were a lot of cases of harassment that women came forward to tell me about. And I was actually surprised at the kind of feedback. I didn't really expect that many people. Like, there were over 40 people who participated in the conversation. And right now I'm trying to work on getting the film a little bit more publicity. I actually just did a newspaper interview with the Concordian. It's a newspaper from my university where I studied before moving to Toronto, and I would really like if it could get a little bit more attention because it's really an important issue.
No, absolutely. And now, do you think that the Women's March, is it just an American thing, or is it also in Canada?
Well, actually, on the same day, we did have a march here in Toronto, but I didn't exactly go because I wasn't sure about the outcome.
Right.
It's like a lot of issues nowadays, there's always like this hint of cynicism where it's like people complain about an issue, but they don't do enough about it. But I know that in Toronto alone, there were about 30,000 people, which was kind of inspiring. So as a filmmaker, I want to make sure to do my part or do whatever I can to be a part of that debate. It was actually kind of motivating to see that.
No, absolutely. Now, for people who want to follow you on social media, are you on Twitter, LinkedIn, Stage 32? You mentioned you were on YouTube for your blogs.
Yes, for sure. I publish a lot of my films on YouTube as well as my vlog. And there's also the Facebook page for Kairos Productions, which I'm working towards becoming a film company. And I'm also on Instagram at Karina Lafayette.
Now, the next question I was going to ask you was, what are some of the future films that you're working on right now? Or do you have any short stories that are in the works?
Well, actually, for about the past year, I started working on a documentary in Montreal where I interviewed people from the local film industry. Now I have to work on doing interviews with people from Toronto as well. And the documentary, basically, it's kind of partially inspired by my story in terms of how I got into filmmaking and my background relating to my mother, how filmmaking motivated me to get out of that abusive situation. And as well, there's also a couple of screenplays I wrote over the years that I would definitely like to have in production very soon.
No, absolutely. Now, wrapping up, was there anything you wanted to touch base on? Any still funny stories you wanted to share? Like I said, it's just your time after all.
Not exactly any stories that I could think of. I'm not exactly somebody who tells jokes very often. But I definitely feel that anybody watching out there who's also a young artist, whether you're a musician or a filmmaker, that at the end of the day, you shouldn't really concern yourself with critics. It's more about getting your voice out there and remembering that there are people who are going to listen to what you have to say.
No, absolutely. So you have to turn a negative into a positive. He deals with a lot of assholes that, tear you down and make jokes, say you're not worth, a penny to spit on. But, it's pretty much just saying you got to turn a negative into a positive, and you're going to show them, hey, look at what I can accomplish. Now, perfect example, it's what I did, I started my talk show about 2013 because I got tired of, trying to compare myself to everyone. And I'm like, for the longest time, I knew it was going to bite me in the ass, but for the longest time, I was always like, I use my disability as a crutch. Oh, I don't have to do this. I have a disability, or, I don't have to take these classes, or, I'm handicapped. But I knew eventually, like a boomerang, that's got to come around and bite me in the ass. And it did. And I was just comparing myself, to some people. And I'm like, well, it's not my job to impress you. And it's not my job, sure as hell, to please you. And so, but it's basically, you're turning trying to find the words for it. It's basically you're saying a group of people that you may know, even if your family for that matters. Your family sees you in one way, but then you see the public gets to see you in another way. So you feel like you're being torn in half. You know, your public and your fan base says, "Oh, why don't you be more outgoing?" And yet your family, it's saying, "Don't do that because that's stupid. If that's not you." So you're being torn in half, saying, "This is what I want to do for the rest of my life," and this is directed at you. It's your work. I bet you're in the same situation that you're being torn in half, saying, "This is what I want to do until I die." I know this is, all my interviews aren't going to be. I'm not Jared Jeter. I'm not like A-Rod, but a lot of people think I'm an ass. But, it's just, you're not going to constantly hit a home run. You gotta get some good interviews. You gotta get some shitty interviews. You're going to get some guests that you really want on your show. And there's going to be people who are gonna thumb their nose on you because you're not worth their time. And that's the same thing with family. Either they're gonna support you, either they're not. So what I say is, here's the door. Either support me or I never want to see them again. But the point is that whatever labels you want to use, deaf, blind, or in a wheelchair, I have interviewed people who are blind, but they're actors. I interviewed this one guy who has cerebral palsies, and he's doing films. So you can't tell me that just because this make-believe label, or certain people who want to dictate your life, labels do not dictate who you are and who you want to be. And I can't even talk. It's one of those days. In my case, I suffer from depression. I have a speech impediment, and among other things, tip of the iceberg. But save that for another time. But I'm saying, hey, if a kid who is poorly educated can magically, create a talk show out of thin air, that goes to show you that he has the heart and he has the passion of starting something. Perfect example is for your book, for your scripts, for your acting career, and making your short films. It doesn't matter, if you have to please someone, because at the end of the day, they don't really care. They don't matter. That either they're going to be good or they're going to be assholes, and you're basically saying, I have the heart and the character. And I saw a quote today from the Monsters. I can't remember his name. But he's the father, Frankenstein. And he says, it doesn't matter what people label you as or how you dictate your life. It doesn't matter if you're white, black, Asian, Muslim. Doesn't matter. All that matters is your heart and the size of your character to overcome any controversy or any obstacles that go in your way. I deal with a lot of assholes saying, oh, you're doing a great thing, but it's never going to amount to anything. Why don't you get a job and stop living in fantasy land? But yet, I have other 500 people telling me you're doing just a great thing. Why don't you do this full time? Why don't you do all these great things? And that brings back to the theory of being, you should respect certain people, but at the same time, you should say, this is what I want, and you have to respect the person's wishes.
Yes, definitely at the end of the day, really the only limitations are the limitations that we have on ourselves. For sure, obviously shyness, that was my own issue. But in terms of being reserved, that's just my character. Whatever shyness that had to do with the way that I was raised, and I managed to overcome that through my work.
No, absolutely. wrapping up, do you have any funny stories you would like to share? Have you ever pulled any pranks on the people?
No, I wouldn't say I'm exactly the type to do that, actually.
Well, I was going to think of a story, but, it's short on time. But the one thing, I'm a big fan of Bill O'Reilly, and I'm a big fan of Bill Maher. And for my show, I would like to eventually get a combination. I would like to have the same set. When you watch the interview, it's got to be cut in half. So yeah, okay, it's like the Factor. And then maybe I would like have a set behind me that looks like, Bill Maher. But, take one step at a time. But one thing I did take from the Factors, because I'm a big fan of Bill O'Reilly, so going on the record, when I first approached you to be a guest on my talk show, what was your honest opinion? And after doing the interview, how do you feel now?
To be honest, I don't think I really had an opinion. I'm somebody who likes to go into situations with an open mind without really having expectations. Like, I remember I had my first gig as script supervisor, back in November. And at that point, it was my first time actually working on a set. At that point, a lot of the projects I had done were mostly my own. I had never really worked with other people's projects, so before arriving there, I was kind of intimidated because I didn't know what to expect. But when I went in, it was really a fun experience. We were working on a horror film, so I got to see the makeup and costumes and everything behind the scenes. And so one thing I've learned is to go into situations with an open mind without trying to have any specific judgments. And it's the same with the show as well, for sure.
No, absolutely. It's all about being open-minded. But stay tuned for after the show. I do have a couple questions for you. But wrapping up our interview segment, I'm looking forward to part 2. And wrapping up, it was a real honor and privilege to have you as a guest.
Thanks. Same to you.